Welcome to Trending Unpack, the podcast where we slow down the internet and unpack what's really going on. Today, we are strapping on our flight suits because the marketing veil has officially been lifted on one of the most anticipated sequels in history, James Cameron's Avatar, Fire and Ash.
That's right. The trailer drop was...
Right.
It was seismic. We are less than 3 months out from that December 19, 2025 release date.
So close now.
Right. And suddenly we're not just looking at, pretty blue cinematography anymore. We have a clear narrative. We have new villains and some major mythological shifts confirmed.
Shifts that really feel like they're going to alter the DNA of the Pandora we thought we knew.
Fundamentally, yes.
Okay, so let's get into this. We're talking about a franchise that has consistently pushed cinematic technology. I mean, sometimes to the point where people almost forget this is meant to be a 5-film saga spanning decades.
Right.
The question for me, and I think for you listening, is how does Cameron maintain that cultural heat, that relevance across these long stretches of time? Especially for a story that, at its core, explores these huge universal themes: colonialism, environmentalism.
Magic of the natural world, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the challenge of any legacy blockbuster, really. And Cameron knows that spectacle alone won't sustain 5 films. Not anymore.
Not in a streaming era.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not when attention spans are measured in seconds. He needs story weight. He needs philosophical gravity. And what this new source material shows us is that the story weight is shifting dramatically inward.
Inward. What do you mean by that?
Well, the first 2 films were primarily a simple, though visually stunning, dichotomy, right?
Yeah.
It was Na'vi versus human, good versus evil.
A very clear line in the sand.
Very clear. Now, Fire and Ash is promising the franchise's first major internal Na'vi conflict. And it's driven by a shocking rejection of Ewa itself.
Wow.
That's the core unstable tension we need to really explore today.
So, a spiritual civil war on Pandora. That is definitely how you raise the stakes and, avoid stagnation.
It'd have to be.
If the central force of nature, the thing that unifies them, is being rejected, everything changes. Let's jump straight into the logistics.
Yeah.
Let's start with the timeline, because fans have been wondering exactly when this new disaster is landing on the Sully family's doorstep.
Absolutely. And the timeline is extremely tight, which is crucial for understanding the emotional state of our main characters.
Right.
We're picking up just a few weeks after the climactic battle that concluded Avatar, The Way of Water.
So no big time jump. That means the emotional wounds, especially the grief over Neteyam's death, are still lacerating.
Precisely. They were raw. The family unit, so Jake, Neytiri, Loak, Took, Spider, and Kiri, they're still living with the Metkaniina clan in those beautiful reefs.
But it's not a vacation.
Not at all. They are deep in grief. That sorrow hasn't become manageable yet. They sought refuge in the water, but they have not found peace.
And what about the RDA, the humans?
Well, meanwhile, the RDA, they're not defeated. The source material confirms they're merely regrouping. They're planning their next, even more brutal attack, following what was, for them, a devastating defeat.
So it was just a momentary setback. The colonizers always return. But you're saying the immediate existential threat in Fire and Ash isn't the RDA.
It isn't. It's this completely new element that weakens the Na'vi from within.
Okay.
Yes, and here is where it gets really interesting. This is where the mythology just fractures. We were introduced to the Mengquan clan.
The Ash people.
Also known universally as the Ash people. This is the new antagonist faction among the Na'vi, and they are defined by their environment and their fierce pragmatism.
And they have a leader.
They do. A formidable warrior named Varang, played by Una Chaplin. She's described as the savior of her people, and she rides this fearsome creature called a night wraith.
So this isn't just a geographical difference, like the forest Na'vi versus the water Na'vi. This sounds like an unprecedented ideological schism.
It is. It goes right to the heart of what it means to be Pandoran.
So what is the fundamental difference, then, between the Ash people and the Sully's alliance?
It all comes down to their relationship with Iwa.
The life force?
The collective memory, the life force, the central deity of Pandora, exactly. Varang tells this pivotal origin story right in the trailer, and it serves as their central philosophical text.
Okay.
A cataclysmic fire came from the mountains, likely volcanic in origin, and it burned their entire forest. And they cried out to Ewa for help, for salvation.
But she didn't answer.
In their view, the deity did not come. They were left to burn.
That's a profound, catastrophic moment of theological despair, of abandonment. It forces a complete spiritual pivot.
It does. And that feeling of existential abandonment is the root of their thematic and political conflict. The sources confirm that the Ash people have no belief in Awa.
Not at all.
They see the neural network not as a loving mother, but as a system that failed them when they were most vulnerable. So instead, Varang has focused their belief on fire itself.
The thing that destroyed them.
She views it as the ultimate power, the only thing that purifies and controls, capable of both destruction and eventually, new life from the ashes. We see glimpses of a perpetually active volcanic region, which suggests this destruction was just constant. Their environment became their philosophy.
That immediately makes them so morally complex, because if Awa represents harmony and balance and they reject that, what happens to their culture? Do they lose the ability to bond?
And that's the terrifying implication, isn't it? If they reject the collective memory, they potentially lose access to ancestral wisdom, to spiritual reassurance, and maybe even the physical benefits of the neural network.
They become purely materialists.
Pragmatists, exactly. They believe strength is found only in mastering their hostile environment and the tools needed to survive it.
And because they reject the core belief system of Pandora, they turn on their own kind. They see the other Na'vi clans as, weak, deluded.
They absolutely do. They actively attack other Na'vi tribes who see Awa as their goddess, who maintain that spiritual dependence. Varang sees herself not just as a leader, but almost as a kind of fire goddess. She mastered the very element that defined her people's suffering.
So how do they enter the story?
The sources tell us that their first appearance in the film is an aggressive interception. They attack the Sully family while they're trying to transport Spider to High Camp.
So they set up the two-front war immediately.
Right out of the gate.
Okay, speaking of Spider, his arc might be the most radical mythological shift in this whole franchise. It feels like it breaks all the rules from the first two films. I need to know everything about this transformation.
Okay, so let's zoom in on Spider, the human child raised by the Na'vi, the son of the Rekon Quaritch. The trailer confirms he undergoes a massive, almost miraculous change right at the start of the conflict.
How?
We see him lying down, he's critically injured, or maybe he's undergoing some desperate rite, and Awa begins connecting to him directly through the glowing blue threads of the neural network.
This looks exactly like the transfer attempt with Grace Augustine in the first film.
It does.
But that failed. Why does it work for Spider?
That is the question that befuddles everyone, from Jake all the way to Varang. Unlike Grace, Spider survives and he evolves. The sources hypothesize that because Spider has lived on Pandora almost his entire life, breathing the air for those few seconds he can without a mask.
And just being immersed in the ecosystem.
Totally. Immersed in Na'vi culture, the planet's ecosystem, his body was somehow primed for the connection. The source material even hints that Awa is actively selecting him.
And the result of this selection?
It fundamentally breaks the biological barrier between the two races. Spider is confirmed to be the first human who can breathe on Pandora without a mask.
That's enormous.
It is. He's no longer just a human, he has become essentially part Na'vi.
It completely negates the single biggest weakness of humanity on Pandora. I mean, if the RBA can replicate this, the whole war dynamic changes overnight.
It's a game changer.
And how far does this physical transformation go? Is it just breathing?
It goes further, confirming he's a true hybrid. The sources confirm he has developed a neural cue.
The appendage, the actual prehensile.
Yes, that prehensile appendage that allows for the neural connection, the Sahelu. This is the ultimate symbol of integration.
And do we see him use it?
We do. We're shown him using his newly developed cue to bond with an elu, one of the water-based creatures. And Kiri, his close friend, is there, helping him through this pivotal, defining moment.
The significance of Kiri being there, I mean, she's the spiritual child of Awa, basically, guiding the new hybrid. That's profound. This ability to physically connect is what truly makes him a bridge.
A literal part Na'vi. And this development, it isn't just a cool visual or a plot device. It fundamentally changes the human-Na'vi dynamic. Spider becomes a living paradox, capable of navigating both worlds.
Which makes him the single most important asset.
And the single most important target for both sides. He's the physical manifestation of the franchise's central conflict.
So, while the young generation, Spider and Kiri, are evolving into something new, the older generation, Jake and Neytiri, they're struggling. It sounds like they're, in some ways, regressing under the weight of their trauma.
They are deeply, deeply struggling with grief and the failure of their dream of peace. For Jake Sully, the loss of Netyam forces him back to what he knows best. He returns to his essence,
which is
becoming what the source material calls a grunt, a pure tactical warrior.
So he's coping.
Well, Sam Worthington, the actor, confirms that Jake is using action as a psychological coping mechanism. He goes back to war because that's what he's trained to do. He believes it's the only way to manage the crushing pain.
So he's struggling to lead the family and the clans through this grief.
Desperately, he's retreating into the identity of Toruk Makto, the great warrior, because he can't manage the identity of the grieving father. It's a classic PTSD response.
Yeah.
You default to survival mode.
He's using control over the battlefield to avoid dealing with the emotional chaos at home. And Neytiri. Her sorrow must be immense, and her faith is being tested at the exact moment the Ash people are rejecting Eywa.
Her arc is possibly the most critical and the most heartbreaking. She's described as hanging by a thread, just consumed by sorrow. Zoe Saldana suggests Neytiri doesn't believe she has the emotional fortitude to continue fighting.
And her faith.
For the very first time in her life, her foundational faith in the sanctity and benevolence of Eywa is being put to the test.
That sense of spiritual abandonment, it's a powerful parallel to Varang's origin story.
It is. It establishes a thematic bridge between the heroes and the new villains. They're both responding to Eywa's apparent silence.
But Neytiri's grief is further complicated by her feelings about Spider, the literal cause of Nehem's heroic yet fatal rescue mission.
And that emotional complication is the anchor of her internal conflict. She's struggling profoundly with her feelings for the human child living under her care, the very child whose presence in their life led to her eldest son's death.
That emotional tug of war.
It's going to be central to her journey, her maternal instinct versus her grief and perhaps her, her Na'vi purity. She can't fully blame Spider, but his presence is a constant, painful reminder.
Okay, before we move on to the wild fan theories about who lives and who dies, we have to talk about one major confirmed element that speaks directly to Jake's emotional regression.
Yes.
The return of Toruk Makto.
Ah, the great Leonatrix, yes.
Yes.
Many fans were seriously disappointed that the Toruk was absent in the way of water.
I was one of them.
But the sources confirm that this powerful symbolic ally is returning. Jank is shown reuniting with the giant flying creature in a shadowy cave, almost like pulling out an old war machine.
And then we see him using it.
Oh yeah, flying it through the skies to take down RDA ships.
The Toruk Makto lives. This is Jake returning to his biggest moment of heroism from the first film. It connects perfectly with the idea of him going back to his grunt essence.
It's a psychological anchor point for him.
Exactly.
It's an embrace of his heroic past, his personal legend, to fight a terrifyingly complex present. When everything else is fracturing, his family, his leadership, the spiritual unity of his people, the one thing he can rely on is being the fierce, unstoppable Toruk Makto.
And the spectacle of it.
Well, the spectacle of that return is also Cameron ensuring that the classic Avatar iconography is back on screen.
Okay, that covers the core facts revealed by the trailer and the supporting materials. Now let's transition into the speculation. Let's get into the fan theories swirling around the internet, because this is where the moral ambiguity of Fire and Ash truly takes shape.
And darkens the universe.
Right.
I'd say the biggest fuel for theories, and frankly the most unsettling development, is the potential alliance between the two primary antagonists.
Varang, the anti-Eywa Na'vi leader.
And the Raycom Quaritch, Jake's resurrected human nemesis.
They seem like such an impossible pairing. One is a post-colonial weaponized avatar. The other is a spiritual purist who rejected the central deity of her race. But the trailer confirms they physically bond.
And that bond is Sahelu, and the implications are staggering. The footage shows Varang and Quaritch connecting their neural cues.
The actual cues.
The cues. And the sources are very clear about the implications of this connection in the Avatar mythology. Sahelu is not merely a strategic handshake. It is profound. It allows them to connect mentally, sharing memories, sensory input, emotions.
So Varang isn't just getting guns from Quaritch. She's getting the unfiltered consciousness of a lifelong human soldier.
Exactly. I mean, imagine the depth of that psychological exchange. Varang, who is driven by the abandonment of her god, is now having the memories of a human Rikama, a copy of a genocidal marine, pumped directly into her consciousness.
She would see the cold, pragmatic cruelty of Earth.
The ruthless efficiency of the RDA, the sheer desperation that drives the human colonizers. You'd either radicalize her further or maybe horrify her.
And what does Quaritch get? He has a human consciousness in a Na'vi body. Does this connection actually make him feel a Na'vi spiritual connection for the first time?
And that's the fascinating psychological horror of it. Quaritch, the ultimate utilitarian killer, is now experiencing the intimacy and collective memory of another being through a Na'vi Q. He might experience Varang's trauma, the fire, the sense of betrayal by Eywa.
It could be the most humanizing moment of his recom life.
Or it could simply grant him the key to exploiting Na'vi weaknesses.
And since that kind of deep neural connection was so explicitly linked to mating between Jake and Neytiri in the first film...
The theories about a potential romance are unavoidable.
Right.
They are strong theories, and the source materials acknowledge that intimate interpretation. The idea is that this goes beyond strategy, becoming a profound, if dark, connection. They could become a new, corrupt power couple on Pandora.
A twisted, cynical mirror of Jake and Neytiri's original pairing.
Exactly. Two leaders, defined by their rejection of their origins and their obsession with material power, joining forces to create a monstrous new ideology.
That raises a really important, deeply troubling question. Why would Varang, a Na'vi leader, betray her race by aligning with the enemy with the RDA, which Quaritch represents? It's a literal pact with the devil.
Well, the alliance is strategic, but it's rooted in Varang's total pragmatic belief system. She's seeking the only thing she believes can protect her people: power and firepower. Quaritch wants to arrest Jake.
And in return,
Varang is promised an endless supply of guns and advanced technology. She needs the tools of fire and destruction to cement her power. The sources draw a clear and tragic parallel here.
it's a profound betrayal.
It mirrors historical patterns of colonization, where external forces exploit pre-existing internal divisions. Segments of the colonized population often align with the invading power for strategic advantage, even if Varang truly believes she's gaining influence from it.
It's a cycle of self-destruction driven by perceived necessity.
Tragic.
But the biggest, most shocking plot twist theory relates to a character we all trust, Neytiri. The trailer shows her wearing the Ash People's colors.
This detail sent the fandom into an absolute frenzy. It challenges everything we know about her loyalty and her faith.
What exactly do we see?
Neytiri is shown with her faith painted in deep red and black, the colors associated with Varang and the Manquan clan. We even see Quaritch sporting these colors in the finale footage.
Suggesting it's the uniform of this new combined antagonist force.
It seems to be, and we've never seen her use these colors before. Her Alma Takaya colors were green and yellow, tied to the forest.
So what are the prevailing theories? Why would she adopt the enemy's war paint?
There are three major lines of speculation, and they're all rooted in her deep sorrow and crisis of faith. The first, and most optimistic, is that she is trying to infiltrate the clan.
A spy mission.
Maybe to understand their anti-Awa ideology from the inside,
Yeah.
or just to gather intelligence for Jake's resistance. She is, after all, a brilliant and ruthless warrior when she needs to be.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the second theory?
The second is the huge shock theory, which, fits Cameron's love of emotional gut punches. This suggests she might actually shift sides,
Effect.
perhaps out of sheer spiritual desperation after Netyam's death. If Awa failed her, why cling to the old ways? This would be the ultimate conflict, ripping the Sully family apart. Imagine the emotional weight of Jake having to fight his own wife.
That would be devastating, but it aligns with her state of profound sorrow and tested faith you mentioned earlier. So she'd do it not out of malice, but out of absolute brokenness.
Exactly. And then there's the third, more politically nuanced theory.
Go on.
This one suggests a potential political maneuver late in the film, maybe necessitated by Jake's continued retreat into his warrior identity. The theory is that Neytiri surprisingly replaces Varang as the Manquan clan's leader by the end,
Wow, a hostile takeover.
inheriting control over this powerful, albeit corrupt and damaged faction to reunite them under the banner of resistance. She might adopt their colors to gain legitimacy and then leverage their power against the RDA.
Regardless of whether she defects or infiltrates, the stakes for Neytiri are incredibly high. And the sources hint very strongly at a potential near-fatal sacrifice.
Yes, there is a tiny, easy-to-miss detail near the end of the trailer that suggests a near-fatal injury during the climax.
What is it?
Neytiri is shown in this furious aerial battle with Varang. They're on their Bansies, and if you look closely at one frantic frame, Neytiri has an arrow sticking out from her back that is pierced right through her chest.
A puncture wound right near the heart, the absolute epicenter of life for the Na'vi.
Precisely. The sources point out that this wound is terrifyingly close to where the Na'vi heart would be, suggesting it could be a fatal injury or at the very least require immediate radical intervention to save her.
And this might explain.
It could explain her appearance in a futuristic hospital bed in an earlier teaser that viewers may have forgotten about. It indicates her life is in imminent danger during the climax of the film.
Let's circle back to Spider now, the emotional center of the previous film. His conflict with Quaritch defined the way of water. Where does Fire and Ash take that rivalry, especially now that Spider is practically Na'vi?
Well, the climax is clearly designed to hinge on Spider's loyalty, but this time the stakes are ultimate. They're irreversible. The sources show Spider wielding a weapon.
Which is a significant moment because he's always rejected violence.
Right, and he's threatening to kill someone just out of frame. Based on the footage and context, the prevailing theory is that he is protecting Jake, his adoptive father, from Quaritch, his biological father.
The film has been building to this.
Methodically, it's built a profound emotional foundation for this moment. Spider saved Quaritch at the end of The Way of Water out of this fundamental, if misguided, filial loyalty, despite siding completely with the Sullys.
And now he has to choose.
Now, the new film positions him in a spot where he must decide who lives and who dies. the man who gave him life or the man who raised him. It's the final, brutal crescendo of his emotional tug-of-war, with his new Na'vi identity forcing the choice.
The ultimate expression of the hybrid struggle. Okay, before we transition to the cultural analysis, let's touch on the most mysterious Sully child, Kiri. Any new revelations about her powers?
Kiri remains the most compelling and potentially divine mystery in the whole saga. She's the teenager born of Grace Augustine's avatar, with this unexplained, almost supernatural connection to Eywa.
And the trailer suggests her powers are growing.
Definitely. They're being tested by the family crisis.
Hmm.
We see a glimpse of her calling upon what the sources refer to as the warrior mother in an unknown environment bathed in this sacred purple light.
Spiritual invocation, maybe. She's actively trying to use her abilities to combat the physical war.
Absolutely. And later, she is shown glowing underwater, her bioluminescent dots pulsing violently as she strains to test her limits further. She might be manipulating the water or the neural pathways of the reef itself.
So we still don't know the full extent of her abilities.
The source material emphasizes that her full backstory is still something Fire and Ash has to address. But these scenes confirm she's actively exploring her divine connection, which is a necessary balance to the Ash people's rejection of Eywa.
She is the counterforce to Varang's anti-spiritual philosophy.
Potentially, yes.
That blending of high-stakes family drama, radical mythological shifts, and the classic colonial conflict makes for an incredibly packed narrative. Let's shift our focus now to the analysis of the franchise itself and its cultural impact.
I think if we connect this to the bigger picture, Fire and Ash represents a significant tonal shift. It's moving from simple environmental allegory to complex moral drama.
How so?
The introduction of morally complex Na'vi factions, specifically the anti-Eywa Ash people, pushes the narrative into genuinely darker territory.
Right. Up until now, the Na'vi have been unified, fundamentally good, and spiritually whole, fighting the clear evil of the RDA.
But injecting internal strife complicates that simple dichotomy. It makes the Na'vi culpable in their own fate.
It creates a classic, devastating colonial tactic. Internal division weakens the resistance.
Exactly. The Manquan versus other clans strife is inherently weakening the Na'vi's collective stand against the RDA. It's essentially handing Quaritch an advantage he couldn't have seized on his own.
So Jake now has to fight on two fronts.
Against his human past, which is Quaritch, and against a fractured Pandoran future, which is Varang. And what's fascinating here is how much Cameron is doubling down on character and family trauma as the engine for this war.
To give it that psychological weight to match the spectacle.
He seems to be responding directly to the common criticism that the first two films were visually stunning, but, maybe emotionally thin for some.
Mm-hmm.
The sources confirm this emphasis on family trauma is designed to be very relatable. Loak, for instance, is dealing with the immense pressure of living up to his father, who's a great legend, and the crippling guilt over Netiam's death.
Believing he failed his brother.
Right. And Neytiri is fighting a spiritual crisis. Jake is regressing into a warrior coping mechanism. They're all highly flawed and suffering individuals navigating a family unit that is barely holding together.
And this focus on internal brokenness ensures the story can potentially outweigh story criticism.
That seems to be the goal.
And this emphasis on the Na'vi's own internal struggles is balanced by Cameron's signature world building. We're still expanding Pandora.
Absolutely. We've seen the lush forests, the vast oceans, and now we're dealing with the volcanic ash-covered regions of the Manquan. But the expansion also involves existing alliances, particularly with the giant sentient Tulkun whales.
Ah, yes, from the Way of Water. We know they're deeply spiritual, wise, and profoundly pacifist. How does the conflict bring them into the fold?
There's a very intriguing scene teased at the Tulkun Summit. Jake, Neytiri, and the Metkina leaders, Tonowari and Runnel, are shown meeting with 9 massive Tulkun.
9 of them.
And importantly, one Tulkun, positioned directly in front of them, has unique rings around its face. This suggests it holds a leadership position, perhaps a great chief or spiritual elder.
That suggests the stakes are so high that they are turning to the pacifist whales for armed intervention.
The significance of this monumental meeting is exactly that. They are almost certainly asking the Tulkun for help in the fight against the combined forces of the RDA and Varang's militants.
And this would require the Tulkun to break their sacred tradition.
The Tulkun Way.
We should unpack that. What is the Tulkun Way and what's the gravity of breaking it?
The Tulkun Way is rooted in absolute nonviolence, the sanctity of life. They are philosophers and pacifists. They believe deeply in a Hali, the dream path, or the spirit's journey, and their covenant is not to harm any living being, even those who hunt them.
They are the conscience of the ocean.
Essentially, yes. So to ask them to break this way for the betterment of Pandora is to ask them to abandon their core spiritual and ethical identity. If they take up arms, they risk sacrificing their soul for survival.
which highlights a massive, catastrophic shift in cultural necessity due to the war.
If even the Tulkun must resort to violence, things are truly desperate, and the moral landscape of Pandora has been permanently scarred.
It shows the consequences of the conflict extending to every corner of Pandora's mythology, forcing every species to make impossible moral choices.
Which brings us to the ultimate question about the franchise's longevity. Fire and Ash is coming out well over a decade after the original, but quickly after the second. This film is a test case for franchise endurance in the streaming era. It's testing our patience with this serialized story structure.
And the cultural discussion around Avatar often boils down to this. Will the revolutionary, top-notch visual design carry the film again, or will Cameron finally deliver an epic, emotional story that satisfies the critics who found the first two narratives a bit thin?
The bar for visual spectacle is almost impossibly high. But the narratives seem to be compensating by adding these deep layers of complexity. The internal Na'vi war, Jake's psychological regression, Neytiri's spiritual crisis. And one last character dynamic that's a microcosm of the larger conflict. The challenging relationship between Ronald, the Metkayina Sahik, and Neytiri.
We saw their friction in the last film. It was fueled by cultural misunderstanding and a little jealousy over Jake.
The sources confirm that their complex relationship is rooted in jealousy and ignorance. They are two fierce mothers and powerful leaders, both trying desperately to protect their families and clans. But they come from vastly different backgrounds, forest and ocean, and their personal history makes unity difficult.
And Ronald.
Ronald in particular is fighting fiercely for everything she's ever known, as Kate Winslet noted. Their tension illustrates how deeply the war is affecting the bonds between even the allied clans. They need absolute cohesion to fight the combined Ardia-Manquan threat, but their personal history and cultural barriers are making that unity difficult.
It sounds like Cameron is crafting a narrative that ensures every single relationship, whether it's Jake and Quaritch, Spider and Neytiri, or Ronald and Neytiri, is being pushed to its absolute breaking point.
The foundation of the film is disruption. Disruption of family, disruption of faith, and disruption of alliances. It promises a much darker, far more volatile Pandora than we have ever seen, demanding emotional and moral maturity from characters who are psychologically collapsing.
So what does this all mean for you, the viewer? Anticipation for Avatar. Fire and Ash is unusually high because the trailer didn't just show us new environments. It promised radical mythological changes, specifically Spider's transformation into an essential hybrid.
Right.
It set up incredibly high emotional stakes, particularly around Neytiri's possible fate and Spider's final brutal choice between his two fathers. And crucially, it delivered the franchise's first major Na'vi versus Na'vi war, ensuring the enemy is no longer external, but tragically internal.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the most profound thematic risk Cameron is taking is introducing a villain like Varang, who fundamentally challenges the central spiritual concept of Eywa.
It really undermines the foundation of the first two films.
It does. The first two films relied on the idea that Eywa is benevolent, omnipresent, and always a source of strength. By introducing a faction molded by the idea that Eywa abandoned them in their hour of need, Cameron risks making the core spiritual structure less reliable. He's asking profound questions about faith and suffering.
And that raises an important question for you, the audience, to consider.
Will challenging the belief in Eywa make the franchise deeper? Will it introduce crucial moral relativism and force the Na'vi to rely on themselves, making their victory earned rather than granted? Or will it risk alienating audiences who rely on that central spiritual belief structure as the comforting, magical foundation of Pandora? That challenge, faith versus survival, will define this film's lasting legacy.
A fascinating test of faith and loyalty, both for the characters and the fans. We'll be watching on December 19th. That's all the time we have for this unpacking of Avatar, Fire and Ash. Next time on the show, we'll be looking into a developing geopolitical story. Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela president captured, and why global attention is intensifying.
Don't miss it.
We'll catch you next time, right here on Trending Unpacked.